when I arrived at the White House, I was inheriting a $1.3 trillion deficit. We had taken record surpluses when last time there was a Democratic president, and over the course of a decade moved to record deficits. The big problems we have in terms of debt and deficits have to do with structural gaps between the amount of money we're taking in and the amount of money we're spending. And if we're going to get serious about the deficit, then we're going to have to look at everything: entitlements, defense spending, revenues. How do all those things fit together so that we can have a sustainable budget that invests in the things that we absolutely need for our long-term future, and we stop funding some things that are nice to have but we can't afford. And that's going to be a tough conversation, which is, it's interesting now when you listen to the Republicans talk about out-of-control government spending, and then you ask them, well, what would you cut? And there's this deafening silence. And they'll say things like, well, we'll roll back health care. Except it turns out that, according to the Congressional Budget Office, the health care bill is actually going to reduce our deficit by over $1 trillion over the next 20 years. So that would add to the deficit. And then they'll say, well, we'll pull back the unused portion of the stimulus. Well, first of all, most of it's already been spent, and a big chunk of what hasn't been spent are actually tax cuts, which they say they're for. And then they'll say, well, we'll roll back spending back to 2008 levels without being clear that that would mean, for example, a 20% cut in education spending. So one of the things that I think as voters, everybody here should be doing is constantly asking people, when you say you want to get the budget under control, what exactly do you mean? What exactly are you going to do? And if they can't answer the question, then it means they're not serious about it. All right. Yeah, right here.
Hi, Mr. President. My name's Emily East, and it's such a privilege to have this opportunity to talk to you.
Thanks, Emily.
I want to ask you a question about a program you implemented early on in your presidency that doesn't really make it to the top of the headlines, per se, the Sustainable Communities Program. And this is more getting to quality of life for middle-class families. It's the idea that the federal government is going to invest kind of more comprehensively by a partnership between transportation, housing and urban development, and sustainable communities. You did a fantastic job of incorporating that in the Stimulus Act, and actually Seattle has received the benefit of that just recently with funding through the Tiger program with Senator Murray's support on the South Park Bridge, which is helping a community that really needs it. Are we going to be seeing more of that kind of innovation, having the bureaucracy, if you will, talk to each other and be more systemic and thorough in how that they're addressing communities to help us kind of live and work and be sustainable and have access to transportation, which will make all of our lives a little bit easier?
Absolutely. And I appreciate you asking the question. Look, part of my goal is to figure out how do we make government smarter. I don't want government bigger. I want government smarter, because a lot of what we do is not as efficient as it should be. And so the idea behind sustainable communities is pretty simple. If you've got Department of Transportation over here, and you've got the Environmental Protection Agency over here, and then you've got social service agencies over here, and they're not talking to each other, and they're not planning together, and there's no coordination regionally between the city of Seattle, surrounding suburbs, then what you end up with is the sum being less than the whole of, or the whole being less than the sum of its parts. And so what we want to do is make sure that there's just more efficient coordination, and we're thinking through if we're spending money on transportation, how do we do it in a way that is encouraging economic growth? How are we doing it in a way that is reducing sprawl? How are we doing it in a way that it makes commuting easier for people? How are we coordinating between various localities? And I think we've got a great opportunity to do more of this as we think about our future infrastructure needs. One of the things that I've said would make a huge difference in us continuing the progress that we've made on economic growth and putting more people back to work is to finally tackle the huge backlog of infrastructure needs that we have. Not just traditional infrastructure like roads and bridges and sewer lines and water mains, but also high-speed rail, also a smart grid that can help us get clean energy from one place to another in an efficient way where there's we don't lose as much energy as we do right now with these old power lines that we have. How do we make an air control system that reduces delays? I got to admit, I don't fly commercial that much anymore. But from what I hear, it has not improved. It's not that pleasant of an experience. So these are all areas where we've got a huge amount of progress to make. And if we have a serious agenda for infrastructure, and instead of politics determining where the money goes, we start giving some thought to how do we get the best bang for the buck, how do taxpayers get the best value for the money that they're spending, so that we don't build bridges to nowhere, but instead we're connecting people in the most effective way possible, then that can not only put people to work, but it also lays the foundation for long-term economic growth well into the future. That's going to be a major focus that we have over the next couple of years. And my hope is we can get Republican support, because historically, the issue of infrastructure has always been bipartisan. And if we're thinking from a perspective of how do we make America competitive long-term, you know, people go to China right now and they come back and they can't believe that China has better airports than us. Or they're building high-speed rail lines, and we're not. I mean, we used to have the best infrastructure in the world, and frankly, we can't make that claim anymore. And I want us to get back to number one and put some people back to work in the process. So, all right. Right here.
Mr. President, I'm Nisi Hilton. I'm a neighbor down the street. And my question is regarding the future and being number one in the U.S. One of my fears is that we are not going to be competitive, and we're going to shift our dependence from Mideast oil over to other countries that are innovating and manufacturing like crazy with alternative energy.
Right.
And I know we've done some work to encourage the U.S. to catch up, but I'm still concerned that we're already falling way behind. And that'll affect the future for my children in terms of jobs and our economy.
Well, it's a great question. Unfortunately, we haven't weaned ourselves off Middle East oil, so we're still sending the billions of dollars there, and we're falling behind when it comes to alternative energy. We got a good start with the Recovery Act. We started investing in clean energy, in projects all across the country. And I'll just give you one example about of what we've been able to jumpstart. When I came into office, the United States accounted for about 2% of the market in advanced battery technology. Now, these are the batteries that go into electric cars and electric trucks and hybrids. We had 2% of the market. And I said, well, if we're going to make an investment in the cars of the future, we should be making the parts here in the United States too. And so we started looking at who's got capacity to start building these advanced batteries. And through an investment in the Recovery Act, we are now on pace to have 40% of the market by 2015. So in a relatively short period of time, we have created advanced battery manufacturing plants, privately owned, all across the country. We've got the expertise to do it. We just didn't have the wherewithal to do it. That shows you how fast we can turn things around if we're making good, smart, strategic investments. And I think that there's more that we can do next year. Part of it has to do with things like a renewable energy standard, for example, that's, you know, local governments and the federal government are big purchasers of energy. So us being good role models by saying we're going to buy more fuel-efficient cars, and we are going to be customers for these new nascent industries. That can make a difference as well. Another good example of an area where we can make progress right away is making buildings more energy efficient. I mean, we can probably solve, at least theoretically, a huge chunk of the greenhouse gas problem just by making our buildings more energy efficient. And Eric's a contractor, so I haven't talked to him about this, but one of the things that I'd love to do is to see more and more contractors just be in the business of retrofitting homes to make them better insulated, have better HVAC units. When I was here a couple of years ago, I went to a company called McKinstry, which is doing unbelievable work. Started off as a mom and pop operation and built itself up. It's got over 1,000 employees now, and it goes to hospitals and schools and helps them figure out how can they save huge amounts of money by becoming more energy efficient. A lot of families and businesses are interested in becoming more energy efficient, but the challenge they've got is finding the capital up front. And so we've been talking about, at the legislative level, creating a program called Homestar, where families could get a tax credit or the money up front to make these investments and then pay it back gradually as they saw their electricity bills go down. So there are a lot of creative ways that we can jumpstart this industry. I think people are really interested in it, but you're absolutely right. Right now we're behind. We invented a lot of technologies where we are now no longer the leader. Solar energy, wind energy, and that's something that I'm determined to change. But government is going to have to play a role in helping to jumpstart a lot of investment from the private sector that will eventually come in once they know that there's going to be a market for this clean energy. So, all right. Yes, sir. Got a mic right behind you.
Yeah, I'm Cliff Ekman. I'm Cindy's father, and Eric, my son-in-law.
You got some cute granddaughters.
And I have some very cute granddaughters. Yeah, we're very proud of them. Anyway, we'd like to welcome you to the Northwest. And you may not hear this very often, but I would like to say we're very proud that you're our president.
Well, I appreciate that.
So,
thank you.
yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Many of us feel that way.
Thank you.
But my question is, it seems like I was just reading that our trade deficit announced in August was like $46 billion. $28 billion of that was with China.
Right.
And it seems to me one of the big problems are import tariffs. We have a lot of countries such as China, Korea, Japan, many European countries have import tariffs that protect their industries.
Right.
That's the one question, and what can we do about that? And the other is the export of jobs that happen with corporations, and they get tax benefits for it,
right,
which doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Well, look, they're both great questions, and I'll take the second one first. We've got a bunch of tax loopholes, a bunch of provisions in the tax code that actually encourage companies to invest and keep profits overseas. They've been on the books for a long time. Jim, Patty, others have consistently voted to close these loopholes. It has been consistently resisted by the other side. In fact, one of the ways that we were able to get some help to local governments to keep